Uh-oh, Disney and Sony are fighting again.
Oh no! Who's gonna be the ones that lose because of this?
Who gets to make the next Spider-Man movie? Honey, who do you want to make the next Spider-Man movie?
I want everyone to make them, just like you do.
Oh, okay. Well, that was my big point. Let's not bury the lead here. My personal belief is that at this point, Spider-Man should be in the public domain. Based on the copyright law as it stood in 1962.
Which is when Spider-Man was first published?
Yeah, good point. Yeah. When he was first published in Amazing Fantasy 15, the copyright law, the Act of 1909 said you get 28 years, and then if everything's going well, you can renew, or your widow can renew, or your kids can renew, or your, whoever owns it can renew 28 years later. So it gives you 56 years total copyright protection for whatever fixed creative work you're going to make. In this case, comic book starring Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. And that would put us at last year, 2018. So a year ago, I think, based on the law as it stood at the time, not taking into account the 1976 Act, which would have retroactively extended the copyright term, in my eyes, unfairly, Spider-Man should, at this point, be in the public domain.
So then why isn't it?
Well, like I already hinted at, the 1976 Act said, okay, now we're saying it's going to be your lifetime. If you're an author, you get copyright protection for your entire life. And then after you die, 70 more years. Just in case. Yeah, just in case you died and you left a 5-year-old who was never going to grow up behind.
So I've heard that if somebody's to re-release their movie or their work, kind of like how Disney unlocks their vaults and re-releases Snow White, that this is going to extend their copyright. Is that true?
Well, that's not entirely true. With copyright, that's just a set term of either life of the author plus 70 years, or in the case of works owned by a corporation, 90 years. But there's related laws for intellectual property, and one of those is trademark. And basically, if you don't, this depends on the type of trademark you're using and the type of business you're in. But typically, if you don't use something for 7 years, the trademark lapses and then someone else can claim that and make a trademark on it. So for things like Mickey Mouse, which is set to enter the public domain again, it never has, but it's always set. And then for some reason, coincidentally, the copyright term gets extended. It's going to enter the public domain. The character will, or Steamboat Willie, that first cartoon will, in 2023, but I will be shocked. I will be absolutely shocked if that comes to pass. But all that talk about copyright is just to say that I think we're past the point culturally where anybody can make a moral, or I say even a legal claim to owning this character. Stan Lee, the writer, passed away. Steve Ditko, who many consider co-creator or maybe even outright creator of Spider-Man, has passed away. Jack Kirby, who created the character on which Spider-Man was initially based, The Fly, back in the late 1950s, sadly passed away decades ago. All the gentlemen involved with the initial creation of this character are gone. And their children, Stan Lee's children are in their 60s. So there's not really, as I see, anyone with a moral claim or a greater moral claim than anyone else to use Spider-Man.
So then what happens? Is Sony just going to keep the rights to it? How does that work? Who gave them the rights to it?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I say an interesting story too, because back in the late 90s, Marvel was in bankruptcy. Mm-hmm. So they sold a lot of film rights in perpetuity, which meant that they really, those studios like Fox got the X-Men and Sony, Columbia Pictures got Spider-Man. And as long as they kept making movies, they would never have to relinquish the license to continue making movies. The weird thing was, I had heard years ago, and I forget where, if someone could tell me, that'd be great, because I had heard initially, a decade or more ago, that Sony was only able to do 7 Spider-Man movies. And that would be, at this point, they've done 1, 2, 3, Amazing 1 and 2, and then the 2 new ones with Tom Holland. And I would have thought, well, if that was true, they'd be done, but I guess not. But I'm curious, Sony, like I just mentioned, they've rebooted this a couple times. They keep making new Spider-Man movies. What do you think's good about any of them? Or bad about any of them? What do you like best, honey?
Well, I honestly like Spider-Man best when he's fighting with the Avengers, so Sorry, Sony, I don't think you're going to do all of this.
Okay, so your preference, like many people we've seen on the internet reacting to this, would just be keep Spider-Man with the rest of the Marvel heroes. Now, there is some drawback to that. There's been photos with Robert Downey Jr. and Tom Holland posing together on Instagram, kind of, I guess, to build goodwill for returning Spider-Man to the MCU. But, spoiler alert, Iron Man's dead.
Right.
I don't think Robert Downey Jr. is coming back. I don't think he's going to
Right.
make a new movie with or without, Sony's Spider-Man involvement.
Yeah, I had thought maybe that this meant that Tony Stark wasn't coming back, but maybe Robert Downey Jr. is going to go to Sony and work in the Spider-Man universe there.
Oh, that'd be weird.
Yeah, who knows?
But, well, your suggestion was he would play what villain?
The Green Goblin.
Yeah, the Green Goblin. That might happen. I don't know if anyone could top Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin.
Oh yeah, probably not.
That guy was great. But you know what they do have in the works? I think Sony thinks they can hold on to Spider-Man, do it themselves, and they'll be fine because they've got Tom Hardy as Venom.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's in all likelihood the next Spider-Man movie we see is Spider-Man versus Venom.
Yeah, but I don't see why they can't just allow both.
They got Tom Holland. They
Right.
got Tom Hardy. They got the Tommy Boys.
Right.
It's going to be great.
But why not allow him to continue on with the other Avengers?
Well, there's a financial reason for that. And the big financial part of it is that for these last two movies, reportedly in Variety and other sources, Disney gets 5% of the gross from the Sony Spider-Man movies.
Uh-huh.
And they allegedly wanted 50% going forward. So Sony was willing to go as high, according to Variety, as high as 25% to give to Disney. But if Disney wants 50, they're like, look, we'll just do it ourselves. And the other thing is Disney has all the merchandising rights. Mm-hmm. So they can make all the Spider-Man t-shirts, toys, etc., and they get all that money. All Sony gets is the movie money. Mm-hmm. But again, in just my opinion, I think Sony does better at making movies than Disney does. I think Disney cheaps out on the quality of their production.
Right, but they've got the other characters that build better storylines.
Mm-hmm. Well, then I guess we just got to go back to my original argument of I think anyone should be able to make them. So not just Spider-Man movies, but also as of this year, Avengers movies, because they came out for the first time in 1963.
Now, would that then go by the art, like by the characters or the story? The Avengers story, or is it like Wolverine? Or, sorry.
Wolverine counts too.
Well, is it by, just all of the different characters, Captain America, just in order of being released?
Right. It would be, basically the characters. So Captain America, since he's a World War II character, would have been, in the public domain decades ago at this point. Mm-hmm. And Wolverine of the X-Men came out in, I think, the late 70s, so we wouldn't be there yet. And also, if it was the late 70s, he would be, I think, more fairly protected by the 1976 Copyright Act, which would mean that we wouldn't see him in the public domain for like a century, which is a crazy amount of time.
Right.
But, that would be by law for that one. Now, so there's other ones like Thor. And Thor isn't originally a Marvel character. Thor is Thor. Thor is like a Norse myth.
Right.
So, people can already make other Thor movies. You just can't make it super similar to the way that Disney and Marvel do it.
Well, what about in Adventures of Babysitting, where they had that Thor character and it was definitely modeled after the Marvel Thor?
That's a good point. I forget what the agreement was with that, but I do believe, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I do believe there was a licensing agreement between that production company, which might have been Columbia, I forget.
Oh.
But and Marvel at the time, which in the 80s would have been owned by, I believe, Cadence Enterprises, which also owned, I think, Revlon.
Oh.
Or vice versa.
Okay.
But, I'm not sure of the exact chain of command at that point.
Huh.
And some of the other stuff Sony has coming up as they try to extend their Spider-Man cinematic universe, because they have the rights to about 1,000 tangential Spider-Man characters, including a film they're making right now, Morbius, the Living Vampire, starring everyone's second or third favorite Joker, Jared Leto. And the other thing Sony's been working on, still in pre-production, I believe, if even that, maybe just active development, is the Silver and Black movie, which would star Silver Sable and Black Cat, two female protagonists in the Spider-Man universe. And I've always thought, I've said before that I think Amber Heard would be a great Black Cat, but you've got another opinion on this one.
Well, I mean, Gal Gadot was already the Catwoman type of Wonder Woman in one of the movies.
Right.
But also maybe Megan Fox would be a really good one.
Oh, you know what? I take back everything I said. Yeah. You just convinced me on the spot. Now I want, Sony, you don't need Disney. All you need is Megan Fox to agree to be Black Cat and to inappropriately flirt with younger Tom Holland Spider-Man. I'd pay money to see that twice, if not thrice.
I'm sure thrice.
Okay. All right.
I'd buy it on 4K.
Oh, well, that's, again, going back to the quality of Sony movies versus Disney movies. If we can, we like to go see these movies in Dolby Cinema,
right,
which is true 4K projection. And Sony puts out true 4K movies. Disney, Marvel does not. Captain Marvel doesn't look as good as a Sony film,
right,
released in 4K. It's true 4K. And to me, that's important. So if, Disney wants to win my loyalty back, they need to put money into the production. I know they're getting a profit. They make so much money off these Marvel movies. I think they owe it to the fans, especially if they have a monopoly, on these characters. They owe it to the fans to put forth the best work that we know is possible. And I don't think they do that.
No, they don't.
Okay. But, if you agree with me, or if you disagree, I would love to hear about it in the comments. And then besides that, honey, what do we always say?
Well, if you like this video, be sure to click that like button and let us know why you like it in the comments. And be sure to subscribe so that you can get updates about all of the videos that we have coming out, and so you can watch him draw different characters.
Absolutely. I'm always drawing in these videos. I didn't mention this yet, but this Spider-Man is an old illustration I did based on a Todd McFarlane Spider-Man, who for most people my age, and probably most people, it's like he's one of the top 5 best Spider-Man artists of all time. Like if you're going to be a purist, you'd probably say Steve Ditko, then John Romita, and then I don't know who else, Todd McFarlane probably.
Well, and he's the highest selling for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He's definitely he made the most, the best-selling Spider-Man comic of all time, as you say. But again, anything you want to say, anything you want to add to the conversation, do it below in the comments. And until next time, artists out there, keep drawing.
Keep drawing.